But the fact that they knew that it was 4 for a double pendulum was, to me, the amazing thing, because I don't know what kind of intuition Newton had to have to understand that there is such thing as acceleration. I mean, we take it for granted. Acceleration is a parameter you use to describe a dynamical system. I mean, nobody else talked about acceleration before that. I mean, or velocity even. I mean, velocity, maybe people had an idea. But I think if you look back at great physicists, the biggest contribution, I think, is not the laws, it's the variables. Thinking about entropy, thinking about these new variables that describe a system, that's I think the energy. I mean, energy is a concept that's fairly new. I think it's about 200 years old. I mean, this is to come up with these deep concepts, that I think is much, much deeper than the actual formula that connects these variables.
So there's I have so many questions in my head hearing about this amazing tool that we could imagine using this on galaxies and on exoplanetary systems and things, which would be really fun. I'm kind of curious, come back to the pendulum case, that's obviously a fantastic success. With the fire, I mean, you could say it's 24, but I don't really know of a physical model where we could say, oh, you need 23 parameters, so it's pretty close. Are there other physical systems where it's hitting the right number?
Yeah, so we've tried it with a couple of mechanical systems, both real and simulated, that we know the answer, like a double elastic pendulum, with springs hanging out, sort of physics 101 type things, and it gets the right answer.
Wow.
But we have to try it on other things. But the idea is that this feeds on massively parallel data streams. So cameras, a video stream is a good thing. Any radar, I mean, any kind of massively parallel streaming source that you have, you can use it and find out what are the sort of the underlying variables hidden there. And I think, again, it's a tool. I mean, you look at that. It doesn't give the variables any names. It just gives you the value for every frame, and from there, maybe you can, maybe we can start making sense of it.
I kind of want to run it on the entire universe and see if it gives the answer 42.
Yeah, right, exactly. It turns out
that would make sense.
Yeah, there's just 3 variables, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, does it have, because we're kind of talking around an idea that's maybe familiar to us, but just to explore it for the audience, and that's Occam's razor, that the simplest ideas tend to be the correct ones. And so you said here that you kind of squeeze it down from 8,000 parameters it's doing great, but 4 it's doing almost as good, or maybe even better in some cases. I want to ask you about that. But how is it, are you manually telling it, no, 4 is better than 8,000, or does it somehow filter between those and apply its own Occam's razor?
It has its own Occam's razor. There is a clever technique in data analysis where you sort of you can find out what is the dimensionality of the manifold of a data set automatically. And the gist of it is sort of imagine that you have data that's really on a curve. It's in a high dimensional space, but it's really on a one-dimensional curve. So if you start at the beginning and you expand the sphere around the origin of the data set, as you expand the sphere, more and more data points are inside the sphere, and the number of data points grows linearly with the radius. So it's a one-dimensional thing.
Okay.
If it's a surface, as you grow the sphere, the number of points included in that sphere will grow as a square.
Yeah.
So that gives you the dimensionality of the data set. It's a kind of a simple, very simple technique. It's well known. And so we do that with this data set, and it gives us the number 4. It gives a 4.2 actually.
Yeah.
But which means that this double pendulum maybe had a little bit more than 4 degrees of freedom. Maybe it was vibrating. Maybe it was the pixelation of the camera. Okay. There's some more to it, but you can actually get a very clean number.
It sounds like when you compare to the next 2 frames, in the machine learning parlance, you might call that cross-validation almost. You're checking the predictions and choosing between models, which ones make the best predictions. Right. With cross-validation, we've often heard it argued, and I think it's, maybe you have a view on this, that it kind of knows about Occam's razor already. If you take a very, very complicated model, imagine like fitting a polynomial of like 100 order polynomial, very, very wiggly line through 100 data points, it does beautifully. But the next point, it's, polynomials are very unstable. They just go completely wild for the next data point. Whereas if you choose a 0th first order thing, it's very stable,
right.
and so it will make the simplicity leads to better predictions. And so cross-validation almost knows, it's almost built in.
Right.
So I wonder, you're only going 2 frames across, but if you go further and further into the future with these double pendulums, do you see any, does it still work? Do you see any differences between the complex models and the simple models in those cases?
Yes, actually, that's a great question. When you use the sparse model that has only 4 variables, it can generate future frames that look like it's much more stable in the long term. So but when you use 8,000 variables, it can generate very, very crisp images. Or maybe of a fake pendulum, but the images look really, really good. So you get if you use many variables, you get very good looking predictions that are not stable in the long term. You use small subset or a tight set of variables, you get very stable long term predictions, but it can't do the high fidelity rendering. So we end up actually to do it well, we use predictions at all scales. So you use the 4 variables to know where the pendulum is, and to render it well, then you use the.
It's very powerful. I mean, the fact you can just quantify this number is pretty special. It makes me think of, in my field, obviously, in astronomy, one of the things we want to do is look for intelligence in the universe, life in the universe, and a techno-signature would be an information-rich signature, presumably, or many of the ones we might imagine, like a radio signal beamed our way with the galactic encyclopedia on board. And so it makes me wonder, have you thought, could this be used in some way as a detection algorithm for complexity? This is a system which you absolutely can explain with 4 variables. This requires a huge number of variables, and therefore there's some architects behind the scene here.
Right, I think so. I think that could be an approach, and you would need to handle the randomness issue. So you can, so if you're trying to model so you need to have built-in stochasticity, which the thing we've built cannot handle stochastic signals. So, and that's really, really important. There's other techniques that are better suited for that.
You mean signals? So just saying signals with randomness embedded within them. Yeah.
So if you try to model a random signal and you don't know any better, you think, oh, this is very rich in information, whereas actually it's not. So distinguishing between random noise and information is hard. This is sort of almost the conundrum of information theory. If you try to compress a file of random numbers, is very, very difficult, because it's very, very rich in information, but that information is useless.
Now, I have to ask you, what is your motivation? Because you've been on this journey for 10 years. Are you trying to put me out of a job and all the other physicists? What is in your view, the end goal here, that this would be a tool that we would all be using? Or, I mean, it's hard to imagine we would need as many physicists if this thing was in a fully realized version. So should I be worried about my job?
I don't think you should be worried specifically. I think there's plenty of things to explain. We're not going to run out of challenges of things to model, but it will allow us to model faster, and it would take away the sort of low-hanging. You just look at it and you say, "Oh, this is." You sort of intuit your way through it. I mean, it's going to take care of a lot of things that we can't, the easy stuff, and allow us to handle more complex things. I think we're sort of, I think we as scientists are sort of living in a very brief window of time where we, for most of human history, there was no math. You couldn't explain anything. That's it. It was all observational.
Just magic.
And that's it. And myth. we have math now for I don't know, the plus sign was, I think, invented 400 years ago or something. So it's a pretty brief period that we have math and we have mathematical tools and we can explain things. But I think we're reaching a point where, it's even with the math that we have, it's very difficult to explain things. And maybe physics can last for a little bit longer, but you look at things like biology, I mean, it's kind of hopeless. The complexity there is so enormous that that it's really hard. So these tools that we're developing, I think, can help us, extend that window a little bit. But in the long term, if you're thinking, long term for me is 10 years in AI. AI is for sure going to be able to understand things that we humans, are just incapable.
Yeah, because you could imagine a world where you can almost take the scientist out of the whole process. You could have the observations being taken by some automated robot, we've had robotic telescopes, for instance, very common. Our survey satellites are all roboticized. So the data comes in robotically. It could be analyzed with tools like you're developing with Eureka and other derivatives. And then the scientific publication could be written by ChatGPT.
You're right, that's right.
The figures could be generated by, maybe some combination of like Dolly 2 or something.
That's right.
And then even eventually the presentations will just be done by
by a robot.
By machines. So,
but we'll need, there is something where I think we'll need is a tool that will be able to explain this to a human. To say, okay, this is a very complicated model. It's very accurate. It's very predictive. We know it's true because it matches with future experiments and all this. And here's the gist of it. It's very complicated, but here's the whatever level you're capable. And maybe at some point it's going to be too complicated. And we just, it's like explaining Shakespeare to a dog. I mean, there's no metaphor you can.
It's no common language.
There's no common language. But I think for a while, for a few centuries, we can, I think, hang on and understand.
So we'll be moving towards almost interpreters.
Yes.
Interpreting what it discovers.
Exactly.
And translating it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's the role of future, scientific AI is to explain the complex models that AI does understand in human language. I mean, in a way, ChatGPT is doing a little bit of that. So if you think about it, ChatGPT is a model that has read the entire internet and understands the entire internet in one brain. The entire internet, that is unfathomable. It's read everything. You can ask it about everything that's out there and it has read it. But when you ask it a question, it spits out some explanation that you can understand. And so it translates this entire model, whatever that is, with, 100